Hey there, welcome back. This is part 2 of the video on the Victorinox Officers and Sports Model 1897, Type 1909. And in this video I want to show you my restoration results, and then we'll look at an old Victorinox catalog and then compare this knife against a couple of other old vintage Victorinoxes I happen to have. So there on the table we still have a very old knife case. And inside is still a very old knife, but it's not the same knife. It technically is the same knife you saw in the first video, but then again it's not, and you'll see what I mean. God bless Victorinox. Their old knives clean up better than any other vintage pocket knife I've ever worked with. They just yield great results. And so now let me give you the big reveal. Here is the new knife. New meaning from 1909 to 1923, but it sure looks a whole lot better than it did. You can see the shield now has no corrosion in it. The pins are clean and shiny. The scales are smooth and shiny, clean looking. I was able to clean the brass liners. Let's just take a look at those. Here's under the corkscrew. Here is under the awl. Under the awl and the back spring here we had a little bit of rust, so some pitting remains. The rust is gone, but there's really not a lot you can do about that. Also a little here and here. But I'm going to make a liar out of myself. In the first video I went on about how carbon steel blades, you get the rust out, but you're never going to get the black out and the pitting out and all that jazz. Well, look at this. And also want you to listen for snap. I'm just amazed that came out like it did. Yeah, you can still see polishing marks on it, but it's got luster. It's free of rust and black. It's got a good edge on it. It's pretty sharp. You might remember there were nicks all along it and a lot of nicks here at the tip, and the tip was rounded off, so got a little better point on that knife and sanded out, sharpened out most of those nicks. It's got a pretty good recurve right here from all the sharpening, so I didn't want to keep going. You don't want to take away any more blade material than you have to, but that blade looks good. And let me try something while I got this here. Let's see. Yeah, let's just see what we can do here with a piece of paper. Oh yeah, oh yeah, very nice. And it snaps. And I've not even oiled this knife yet. I typically don't oil them before I make a video because the oil just gets out everywhere and makes a mess. So let's take a look at the small blade. It looks good too. And it's also very sharp. Hang on just a second. Try this again. Oh yeah, very good. And it also snaps. And then the opening tools. Here's the screwdriver. You might remember all the rust, particularly along here. Oh, this was the tool that was frozen that I couldn't even get out with my thumb. I had to use a pick. No problem. Here's the can opener. It was badly stained. Some of those places, those pits remain. It's got a bit of a soft close. That's kind of typical on a lot of old Victorinox can openers. It's kind of like the spring action stolen away by the great spring action the screwdriver always has. And then scissors. I cleaned out the nail nick enough where I can actually find it and get them out. And you may remember that they were frozen shut. They were so rusty that they were frozen shut. The rust is gone. Pitting remains. They've been shined up as good as they can be. But here's the important part. They work. And I keep dropping my paper, but let's give them a test. Oh yeah. 100-year-old scissors. Awesome. I love it that everything works. Now the scissors don't close up quite like they should. You have to push them down into place. But that's the only part of the action that really didn't come back. And we'll give this old knife that. We'll give it that. So I think that's a look at all the tools and the overall state of the knife. Oh, down inside. Let's look inside. That's a good result too. Scissors. Okay, down inside. That looks really good. Nice and shiny. Brass is actually pretty clean, even down inside. Nice and golden. I want to show you an image now out of the 1903 Elsener Swiss catalog, and this is the page that has the officers and sports models on them. And right up here, this is all in German, but I translated it. It says officers and sports knife with shield. And so the shield was put on all the knives in 1909, but in 1903 in this catalog it was offered as an option. So it says officers and sports knives with shield, Swiss coat of arms, protected by law. And then it says number 205 with shield. And here's the image of the 205. It's like your Spartan or your basic model. Down here it says price without bow or the bail, 5.65 francs per piece. And then it says price with bow, 6 Swiss francs per piece. And then it goes on to say this shield can be attached to all officers' knives with fiber scales, except the small 8-centimeter models. And there's a surcharge for that, and it's by number and by piece, 0.35 Swiss francs. So back in 1903, the knife standard came with no shield, but if you wanted to get a shield put in any of the officers' knives with fiber scales, you could do that for 0.35 Swiss francs. You could also get a bail put on for 0.35 Swiss francs. This is also the catalog. They introduced the other tools like saws and scissors, some other things. So here on the table is one of the knives from this 1903 catalog. And so we're going to call this a Type 1903. You can see it has 4 pins instead of 3. And there's some other differences too, but the one that I really wanted to talk about was one I've just discovered. And that is the optional shields, I guess between 1902 or 3 and 1909, actually had a thinner border than the shields that became standard starting in 1909. You see the difference there? So you got the number of pins. This one has 3, a thicker shield outline. This one has 4, a thinner shield outline. Now this is an 8-centimeter knife. This is a 9-centimeter knife, so there's differences in sizes. But you can also see that The one we just looked at has brass liners. This one does not. Not all the old knives had brass liners. I've seen a couple of these that do not. So the interesting thing about this one is that usually when these knives came with brass liners, they also came with brass pins, which this one does not. It looks to have nickel silver pins. I noticed one other difference. This knife exhibits the fluted corkscrew that we are most familiar with on vintage knives, but before this time, they did not have fluted corkscrews. So they had plain originally, went to fluted, fluted ran for a long, long time, then they went back to plain. This one has a saw. That's the extra tool that it has. I can get a hold of it. Tiny nail nicks. So there's your old vintage saw. And as we saw on the 8 centimeter model, it has scissors. So those are a couple of cool differences there. And then I went ahead and I put a model 1937 in here too, because I wanted to show now the shields look similar in dimensions, thickness of the lines. And we're still have the 3 pins. Can't see the third one behind the bail here, but this one has brass liners as well and brass pins. Of course, it still has the fluted corkscrew. So pretty cool. Those are 3 really pretty rare and pretty desirable Swiss Army knives here on the table. And I'm really happy to have this collaboration going with a collector, a fellow by the name of Dave Arnold, who has sent me several vintage knives recently to refurbish. And these are the kind of knives that, you seldom get to lay your naked eyes on, let alone handle and work with. So it's been a real honor. And it's just thrilling to me. I hope I don't sound like I'm bragging. I mean, anybody could do this. All it takes is time and patience. I know now that this knife will never look like it did before I started to work on it. It will never be that dirty and corroded again. I know where it's going. It's going to a good home. It will be preserved and protected. And yeah, this knife will always be better than it was before.